Now to the latest in the search for Nancy Guthrie. The mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie was kidnapped from her Tucson home 12 days ago. Tonight, investigators have a better description of a masked suspect caught on camera. Eyewitness News reporter Michelle Fisher in our newsroom now with a look at the new clues they've uncovered. Michelle?
Been a week full of updates and new clues in this case, but tonight still no suspects or persons of interest. Investigators sifting through thousands of tips now as the family tonight is reportedly growing frustrated. As the number of days Nancy Guthrie has been missing grows longer, so does the list of clues in the case.
You work a lot of dead ends, in other words, hundreds if not thousands of dead ends in these type of cases. But you only need one lead that works.
March 2nd, 2026. 30 days since Nancy Guthrie vanished from her home on North Placitas in Cadisha in the Catalina foothills outside Tucson, Arizona. The memorial at the end of her driveway had been growing for weeks. Yellow roses pressed against the wrought iron gate. Handwritten cards. Photographs of a woman with a warm face and decades behind her eyes. The kind of things people leave when words stop working. Savannah Guthrie was there. Annie Guthrie was there. And walking arm in arm between them, for the first time in almost a month, was Tommaso Cioni. The cameras were rolling. Every frame was being recorded. The world was watching. But the world was not watching his face. It was watching his walk. Because 4 weeks earlier, a masked figure had been captured on the doorbell camera outside Nancy's home at 1:47 a.m., moving through her front gate with a specific rhythm. A gait, a shoulder, a stride. The particular way a body carries its own weight when it believes nobody important is watching. And within hours of Tommaso's first public appearance on March 2nd, the internet had already placed those two walks side by side. The comparisons were everywhere. Slowed down, looped, overlaid. Thousands of people running two clips on repeat asking the exact same question. Is that the same person? I am not here to answer that with a phone screen overlay. I am here to show you something the comparison videos missed entirely. Because whether or not Tommaso Cioni was the man on that porch, the physical evidence assembled by the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department has never pointed cleanly at one person. Points at two DNA profiles, two unknown males. 2 separate locations, 1 crime, and 19 years of shared history connecting the 2 men this investigation keeps returning to, whether the cameras are watching or not. Here is what nobody has put together. Until now, Nancy Guthrie was last seen alive at approximately 9:50 p.m. on Saturday, January 31st, 2026. Tommaso Cioni dropped her off at the front gate of her Catalina foothills home, walked her to the door, and drove 4 miles back to the house he shares with his wife, Annie, in northwest Tucson. At 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera at Nancy's home went dark. At 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker lost its Bluetooth connection to her phone. That is a 41-minute window. Someone was inside that house for 41 minutes. Hold that number. Professional burglars operate on 5-minute windows. 10 minutes inside a stranger's home is considered reckless by law enforcement standards. 20 minutes is the behavior of someone either extremely comfortable or extremely committed. 41 minutes in the middle of the night inside the Catalina foothills home of an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker is not a burglary. It is an operation. Think about what had to happen inside those 41 minutes. Nancy had to be located inside the house. At her age and with her documented mobility limitations, the Pima County Sheriff confirmed she could not walk 50 yards unassisted. She had to be physically controlled. She had to be prepared for transport. She had to be moved from her bedroom, through the hallway, through the main living area, out the front door, through the wrought iron gate, and into a waiting vehicle on North Placitas in Cadisha. All of that while simultaneously watching the street, managing the exterior environment, navigating a dark house in the middle of the Arizona desert, and preventing an 84-year-old woman described by everyone who knew her as mentally sharp and fiercely independent from raising any alarm. One person doing all of that in 41 minutes is operating at the outer limit of physical possibility. Every additional second triples the risk of catastrophic failure. A single sound, passing car, a neighbor's dog, but 2 people divide every task completely. One stays with Nancy. One manages the environment. One moves her through the hallway. One watches the street. One loads her into the vehicle. One drives. The operational wait that makes 41 minutes nearly suicidal for a single person becomes methodical and controlled for two. FBI veteran Michael Biasello, reviewing the doorbell camera footage publicly, stated that the behavior he observed was consistent with coordination between more than one individual. He noted the masked figure appeared to gesture toward someone outside the camera's frame after covering the Nest lens. Sheriff Chris Nanos, when pressed directly on the question of accomplices, did not rule it out. The physical evidence at the scene supports the same conclusion. Fox News drone footage captured in the days following Nancy's disappearance showed smashed exterior floodlights at the rear of her Catalina Foothills property. The doorbell camera faces the front of the house. One person disabling the front camera while a second simultaneously eliminates the rear lighting is not coincidence. That is coordinated two-point entry, pre-planned, synchronized down to the minute. Two people who communicated about timing and positions and roles before they ever turned onto North Placitas and Kadisha. Now here is what that framework means for everything that follows. One person in this operation never needed to appear at the scene at all. His value was not physical. It was informational. The layout of the house, the camera system, the gate, the medication schedule, the pacemaker, the neighborhood rhythms. The precise weekend when the most powerful member of the Guthrie family would be 9 time zones away in Milan, Italy. An outsider would need months to build that intelligence picture. An insider already had it. He had been handed it freely across 20 years of family dinners. Ask yourself what kind of person that is, and then ask yourself who in this case fits that description better than anyone else alive. Here is what the mainstream coverage of this case got wrong. It focused on the man on the porch. It should have been focused on what the man on the porch already knew before he arrived. Nancy Guthrie's Nest camera system at her Catalina Foothills home did not have an active cloud recording subscription. Read that again. The cameras were mounted. The cameras were functional. They could detect motion. They could send alerts to a connected phone. But without a paid cloud subscription, they were storing nothing continuously. When the FBI and Pima County investigators arrived at the scene on the morning of February 1st, there was no footage waiting for them. The FBI had to partner directly with Google's back-end server infrastructure to recover any residual data at all. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed publicly that the video ultimately released was recovered from back-end systems only. The cameras that were supposed to be watching were, functionally, props. The only people who would know that are the people who spent years inside that home. The people who sat in Nancy's living room every week and saw those cameras on the wall. The people who may have helped an 84-year-old woman set up her technology and never once suggested she pay for the subscription that would have made her footage recoverable. You cannot learn that from the outside. You cannot see a camera's subscription status from a sidewalk. That knowledge lives exclusively inside the walls of the house. The wrought iron security gate at the front of Nancy's property showed no signs of forced entry. No tool marks. No damage to the lock mechanism. Pima County forensic teams confirmed this. Either Nancy, who had lived in the same Catalina Foothills home for over 4 decades and felt completely safe there, left it unlocked. Or someone ensured it would be open. Someone who was standing at that exact gate 4 hours earlier, in the warm Tucson night, watching her go inside saying goodnight. Nancy's essential medications were on the kitchen counter inside the house. Sheriff Nanos confirmed publicly that they managed conditions which could become life-threatening without daily dosing. The suspect or suspects spent 41 minutes inside that home. They left the pills behind. If this was a ransom operation, the medication is the single most important item in the building. A dead hostage collects nothing. Leaving those pills means one of two things. Either the people inside that house were so operationally incompetent they did not understand that an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker requires daily medication to survive. Or they already knew she would not need it, because keeping her alive long enough to collect was never the intention. Nancy disappeared on the exact weekend Savannah Guthrie had traveled to Milan, Italy for NBC's coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics. Olympic broadcast assignments are determined and announced months in advance. If you wanted to take Nancy during the specific window when her most powerful, most connected, most publicly visible daughter would be unreachable on the other side of the planet, you would need to know that schedule before it happened. You would need to have heard about the Milan assignment at a family dinner. You would need to be the kind of person who gets invited to those dinners and trusted with that information. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications, because the connection I am about to show you next has not been made publicly anywhere else. On January 23rd, 9 days before the night Nancy was taken, a masked figure was captured on a Ring camera walking deliberately backward past a residential property 6.5 miles from Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills. Not stumbling, not confused, moving in deliberate reverse while keeping his face completely away from the lens. Consumer Ring cameras run on passive infrared sensors. The sensor detects body heat. The processor activates. The lens adjusts focus. The Wi-Fi handshake completes. That entire sequence takes 1 to 2 seconds. Walk forward and those first seconds capture your face. Walk backward and by the time the camera is actively recording, your face has already cleared the frame. The suspect on January 23rd was not lost on a Tucson sidewalk. He was using his own body to exploit a 1 to 2 second technological gap. And when a dog barked nearby, he fled but maintained his backward position. He suppressed the biological reflex to spin toward a sudden unexpected sound. He would rather have tripped on the curb than give that camera a single usable frame. 9 days later, February 1st, the same Ozark Trail hiker backpack with the same reflective safety strips appeared on the front porch of Nancy Guthrie's Catalina foothills home. The figure was not walking backward anymore. He was calm, deliberate. He walked directly to the Nest camera without searching for it. He used foliage from a potted plant on the porch to cover the lens. And then he tapped the camera housing twice. Not frantically, not nervously, casual and rhythmic like a person touching something they have walked past 100 times before. FBI behavioral analysts who reviewed the footage described this specifically as ownership behavior. The movement of someone whose body already knows this space. Here is what nobody connected. January 23rd was not surveillance. It was a rehearsal. The location 6.5 miles away was a test environment. When no law enforcement response came the following morning, the suspect confirmed he was invisible to the system. He learned it without ever setting foot on North Placitas in Kadisha. 9 days later, he arrived at the real address with that knowledge already confirmed. He did not need to test anything. He needed only to execute. The rehearsal and the operation. 2 locations. 1 sequential plan. That is not opportunism. That is architecture. On February 15th, investigators recovered a glove approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home, matching the type worn by the masked figure in the doorbell footage. On February 17th, the FBI confirmed the DNA extracted from inside that glove produced no match in CODIS, the federal database containing over 19 million known offender profiles. A second DNA profile had already been recovered from biological evidence inside the home itself. Also no match. 2 unknown males. 2 separate locations. 2 pieces of biology left behind at 2 points connected to the same crime. 1 person on that porch. 2 people in the evidence. That is not a theory. That is the physical record of this investigation. Tommaso Cioni, 50 years old, born in San Giovanni Valdarno, in the Tuscany region of Italy. He arrived in Tucson, Arizona in 2006 and married Annie Guthrie, Nancy's eldest daughter, that same year. He teaches 6th grade science and AP biology at Basis Oro Valley Charter School in the Oro Valley neighborhood north of Tucson. He studies lizards. He makes homemade pasta. He plays electric bass and sings in a local band. His own biography, written in his own words, describes a man who built a quiet, textured life in the Sonoran Desert. And on the evening of January 31st, 2026, he drove Nancy Guthrie home from a family dinner, walked her to the front door of her Catalina foothills home at 9:50 p.m., watched her go inside, and drove back to his house 4 miles away. 3 hours and 57 minutes later, the camera went dark. No confirmed public alibi for Tommaso Cioni during the window between 9:50 p.m. and 1:47 a.m. has been released by law enforcement. No confirmed public alibi for Annie Guthrie either. They live in the same house. Whatever alibi one provides, the other is positioned to confirm. 4 miles on empty Tucson desert roads at 2 a.m. is under 10 minutes in each direction. That window is wide enough to drive home, wait for the Catalina foothills neighborhood to settle into complete silence, change clothes, return to a house you know better than any other address in Pima County, and be back in your own bed before the Santa Catalina mountains catch the first light of morning. Now consider what 20 years of access to Nancy's home provided. Not in general terms. Specifically, he knew the Nest camera system was not actively recording because he had been in that living room every week for 2 decades. He knew the layout of every hallway between the master bedroom and the front door. He knew the gate. He knew the medication on the kitchen counter and exactly what it was managing. He knew the pacemaker. He knew the Milan assignment because it was discussed at a family dinner he attended. He knew the neighborhood's rhythms because he had driven those streets hundreds of times. Every single piece of operational intelligence embedded in this crime traces back to information that was given to one person freely over 2 decades because he was trusted completely. Former News Nation journalist Ashley Banfield reported on her podcast that a law enforcement source with direct knowledge of the investigation told her Tommaso Cioni could be the prime suspect. The Pima County Sheriff subsequently issued a statement that the family had been cleared. Then federal agents returned to Annie and Tommaso's home more than 5 times. They removed items in brown paper bags specifically used to preserve biological evidence. Annie's vehicle was towed and impounded from the property. The septic system was examined. Security cameras were removed from the exterior of the house. That is not how investigators treat people they have cleared. Now let me address the argument that defenders of Tommaso use most often. The gear. The $20 Ozark Trail backpack from Walmart with reflective strips that glow under infrared like a signal flare. The belly band holster worn incorrectly over a thick jacket. The cheap ski mask. Firearms expert John Correa stated publicly that no one with a single day of tactical training would wear a holster in that configuration. People say Tommaso Cioni is too intelligent to show up dressed like that. But flip that argument completely. An intelligent person who cannot afford to be identified does not dress for operational effectiveness. They dress to build a profile. Cheap, disorganized gear produces an FBI behavioral description of an impulsive, reckless, opportunistic offender. Professional gear produces a description pointing directly at educated, methodical, disciplined individuals. People like science teachers. The costume is not incompetence. The costume is misdirection. And it is working. I am not accusing anyone. I am showing you what is publicly documented and asking you to see what the pattern keeps producing. Now meet the second man. Dominic Aaron Lee Evans. 48 years old. Elementary school teacher in Tucson, Arizona. Founding drummer of Early Black, a Tucson-based post-punk band formed in April 2007 alongside bassist Tommaso Cioni and guitarist Walter I. Goncalves Jr., who they found through a Craigslist listing in the Tucson Weekly. The 3 men recorded their debut album at Loveland Studios in Tucson in late 2009 with engineer Nathan Sabatino. They called it Life, Love, Murder, for words chosen deliberately to represent their shared creative vision. 2 of those words are love. One of them is murder. Evans is approximately 5'9", average build, dark mustache and goatee, photographed publicly, matching the FBI's physical description precisely. In performance footage from Early Black shows at venues across Tucson and Phoenix, investigators identified a marking on his right wrist consistent with what former FBI supervisory special agent and profiler Jim Clemente described when he reviewed the FBI footage and flagged a potential tattoo on the suspect's right wrist as a critical identifying detail. Arizona Pima court records surfaced publicly show Evans carrying prior felony charges including burglary, robbery, theft, and embezzlement. A documented history of the exact criminal behavior this operation demanded. The architect provided the blueprint. The operative followed it. Separately, neither profile closes this case. Together, they account for every piece of evidence on record. Every member of the Guthrie family did the same thing after Nancy disappeared. They put their face on camera and they begged. Savannah Guthrie posted emotional videos from Milan, Italy, where she had traveled for NBC's Olympic coverage, before suspending her broadcasting duties entirely to return to Tucson. The family offered $1 million of their own money for information leading to Nancy's recovery. Savannah cried publicly. She posted on Instagram that every hour since her mother vanished had been agony. Her brother Cameron recorded a direct video addressed to the kidnapper, speaking to the person who had taken his mother and pleading for her return. Annie Guthrie cooperated with investigators and appeared publicly alongside her siblings. Every member of this family, under the most extreme pressure imaginable, found a camera and screamed for help. Grief that large does not stay contained. It spills out whether you intend it to or not. Except from one person. For the better part of a month following Nancy's disappearance from her Catalina foothills home, Tommaso Cioni was invisible. No statement, no video, no interview, no appearance beside Annie during her public pleas for her mother's return. Reporter Brian Enton, reporting live from Tucson on Megyn Kelly's podcast, said Tommaso had not been seen publicly in nearly a week. Big beard, he said. Very recognizable. Gone. When the man who drove your mother-in-law home on the last night she was seen alive disappears from public view while the entire country searches for her. That disappearance is not grief. Grief makes people louder. Silence is a choice. And the specific choice people make when their attorney has told them that every word they say in public is a potential exhibit at a future trial. Now consider the institutional fracture running through the center of this case. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos stood before cameras and stated that the Guthrie family members and their spouses had been cleared. For separate national television networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN, independently reported through their own law enforcement source chains that the suspect had visited Nancy's Catalina foothills property on multiple occasions before the night she was taken. For organizations, for separate chains of sourcing, all confirming the same detail, Sheriff Nanos called it purely speculative. One official voice contradicting 4 independent journalistic organizations simultaneously is not a denial. It is a managed response. And managed responses exist when something is being protected. Then consider what the investigation did after the family was publicly cleared. Federal agents returned to Annie and Tommaso's Tucson home more than 5 times. Brown paper evidence bags left the property. Annie's vehicle was towed and impounded. The couple's septic system was examined by forensic teams. Security cameras were removed from the exterior of their house. In May 2025, 8 months before Nancy disappeared, Tommaso signed a durable power of attorney transferring full control of his financial and property affairs to Annie. Legal experts note this is common in real estate transactions. The document exists. The timing exists. The kidnapping exists. You do not investigate cleared people this way. You do not return 5 times with evidence bags to a house belonging to people you have eliminated from consideration. Here is what this case still cannot answer. 2 DNA profiles. 2 unknown males. No match in 19 million records. If those profiles belong to men with no criminal database entry, the result looks exactly the way it looks right now. Unknown. You came into this video knowing an 84-year-old woman named Nancy Guthrie had disappeared from her home in the Catalina foothills outside Tucson, Arizona. You knew there was masked figure on a porch. You may have heard a name or two. You thought you understood the shape of it. You understand something different now. You know the 41-minute window and what it operationally requires. You know the Nest camera had no active recording subscription and that the FBI had to recover footage from back-end servers that most people do not know exist. You know the gate had no forced entry. You know the medication was left on the kitchen counter. You know Nancy vanished on the exact weekend Savannah was in Milan. You know that on January 23rd a masked figure walked backward past a Ring camera 6.5 miles from North Placitas in Kadisha, suppressed the reflex to turn toward a barking dog, and used his own body to defeat a 1 to 2 second sensor lag. You know that 9 days later the same backpack appeared on Nancy's porch, and the man wearing it tapped her camera housing twice with the casual rhythm of someone whose hands already knew that surface. And you know this. Tommaso Cioni teaches AP Biology at Basis Oro Valley School. His students learn PCR amplification, the same technique forensic labs use to build DNA profiles. They learn gel electrophoresis, the same method that generates the genetic maps entered into Cody's. He puts on nitrile gloves every single working day of his professional life. He teaches students how to handle biological specimens without contaminating them. He understands exactly how DNA transfers between surfaces. He understands what forensic technicians look for. He understands what they miss. And he would know, better than almost anyone outside a forensics lab, that nitrile gloves are not impermeable, that microtears form under physical exertion, that perspiration breaches the material within minutes of sustained contact, that the gloves needed to be disposed of away from the scene, miles away, somewhere no one would look until it was too late. Someone found one anyway, 2 miles from her home, DNA from an unknown male inside. Not in Cody's. Part 2 covers the ransom demand. $6 million. The specific cryptocurrency wallet. What the language of the power of attorney reveals about financial pressure inside that household before Nancy was ever taken. And the one piece of physical evidence connecting both men to the same location on the night of February 1st that law enforcement has not addressed publicly. If this video disappears, you will not find what comes next anywhere else. Subscribe now. Turn on notifications. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has lived in the Tucson desert for more than 50 years. She has a church community at St. Philip's in the Hills Episcopal Church in Tucson that set up a photograph on an easel the Sunday morning she did not appear on the live stream. She has a daughter who got a phone call in Milan, Italy, and felt the ground disappear beneath her. She has grandchildren. She has a home she built her life inside. 40 years of mornings and dinners and evenings on the same desert street. Someone took her out of it. And the evidence has always known who. Legal notice. This script presents publicly documented information and online speculation assembled for documentary storytelling purposes. Neither Tommaso Cioni nor Dominic Evans has been formally charged or named as a suspect by any law enforcement agency. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has stated no suspects have been identified. Sheriff Chris Nanos has publicly stated that Dominic Evans is going through hell as a result of online accusations and that it is horrible. All individuals are presumed innocent. Viewers are encouraged to direct any relevant information to the FBI tip line or the Pima County Sheriff's Department directly.